everybody? Welcome in to another episode of the NFL Seekers podcast. Today, we'll each be ranking our top 10 receivers in the 2024 NFL draft. And this might just be the best receiver class we've ever seen. Like, of all time, it might just be the deepest receiver class we've ever seen. It's a historic one, it's a generational one. We've got a generational one at the top in Marvin Harrison Jr. And I mean, if there's any class that's going to break the record for most receivers taken in the first round, it is this one. So I'm really excited to talk about this episode. A lot of these players are going to be stars. So I'm excited to get into it. How are you?
I'm doing great. And I was gonna say, just to add on to your speech and your peel right there, might be the most receivers in the top 10 in NFL history also. I mean, with these guys on the cover right here, who could all truly be wide receiver ones in almost any other class. But you know, um these kids coming out of high school on these 7-on-7 teams, I mean, these wide receivers are just elite route runners. I mean, it's just the evolution of the receiver is just crazy right now, and I couldn't be more excited, man. I think we got a very similar class to last year, but very more elite, especially at the top. At the top, these guys would have trumped every single prospect last year. So crazy deep wide receiver class. You're going to be finding, guys in the late, fourth to sixth round who could potentially be starters. It's just that kind of draft, and I'm super excited to get into it.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many good receivers that like closer to draft season, we might need to make like a top 20, top 15 list because there's a lot that I want to talk about. But yeah, it's going to be fun because a lot of these guys are going to be like impactful day one in the NFL. A lot of relevance in like fantasy football, and it's just going to be a really relevant episode to listen to. So hopefully you guys are tuning into our NFL draft content. Really excited. Do you want to get into our like honorable mentions before we get into our list? We got a lot to talk about.
Yeah. Let's throw a few names out there for honorable mentions that it was tough, but they just barely didn't make the top 10.
All right, so I'll just say the first few that didn't make my list. I don't think they made yours. My number 11 is Brendan Rice. I absolutely love him out of USC. I just have a feeling that he's just going to be that guy. He just when I watch the tape, he just really pops and he makes some crazy plays. So I think Brendan Rice is definitely really close to my top 10. Xavier Legette, really fun player. Malachi Corley, another really fun player, a gadget running back type of player. Ricky Pearsall, kind of mad he didn't make my list. He's so fun, such a good route runner. Tez Walker, who's really fallen off the face of the earth. I saw him on a top five list for the NFL Stock Exchange recently. And then, yeah, who are you?
Yeah, Malik Washington, for Virginia, a guy who led, one of the highest PFF scores this year, 1,300 receiving yards, 9 touchdowns, elite grades in almost every single category. Somehow didn't crack my top 10. Jalen Polk, who barely didn't make mine. Overshadowed by guys like Rome Odunze, Jalen McMillan. There's a lot of volume to go around in that offense. A guy that kind of, projected to run a 4.48 40. I had a comp for Jalen Polk. I'll just throw out. It's a Romeo Dubes. Reminded me a lot of him. And then one other guy who, damn, I guess might get a little bit of hate, but Lad McConkey, really good slot receiver, kind of a guy who's quicker than fast, in my opinion, projected to run a 4.6 40. And me and Dan had a player comp for him a little while ago of Deontay Johnson, who I thought that was a perfect comp. But just a couple guys didn't crack the list, but really good players.
And one of your honorable mentions did crack our list. Now it's a perfect
Oh,
transition into him right here. My number 10, Jalen Polk out of Washington, the transfer from Texas. I absolutely love this guy. The more I watch him, he just got that feel of an NFL receiver. He just looks like he'll succeed. He really succeeds in the red zone. He comes away with touchdowns. He is a throw it up and he'll come down with the type of guy. He's jacked to the gill, first of all. He's just really built. He's a big guy. He's going to be hard to cover. He's shown the ability to produce on the inside and outside. I compare him to I mean, worst case scenario, Jacoby Myers, because he can, be like that wide receiver two, high tier wide receiver two, really succeeding on the inside and outside. But high tier comp, I think he can be T. Higgins. When I watch him, I see T. Higgins. So I think in the right situation in the NFL, I really do think he can be that type of high tier, like best wide receiver two in the NFL, that type of player. So I do want him to, I did want to have him on my list just because I think his impact day one, especially, will be warranted for like a top 10 receiver in the draft. And I think there will be some teams that want him. I think could go pretty high in the second round. So, I mean, I really like Jalen Polk, 6'2", only 21 years old. I think he's going to run well. I really like Jalen. I think I'm going to be higher on him the most.
Yeah, no, I mean he's a like you said, he's a built dude. I mean, he's 6'2", 204. Kind of reminds me of like almost like Brandon Ayuk type stature to him. But a guy who's very versatile. I mean, he ended up this last season in 2023, he ended up playing 222 snaps in the slot and 317 snaps out wide with elite production, you know. I mean, a guy who's definitely overshadowed by Rome Odunze. You know, who would have been a real wide receiver one given Rome Odunze wasn't in Washington, but I mean, still put up wide receiver one numbers, 1,159 receiving yards and 9 touchdowns with an average depth of reception of 16.8. So yeah, Jalen Polk, it's just crazy. I mean, this guy, you know, he's number 10 on your list. He's number 11 on mine. But man, it's just this is how good this receiver class is.
Jalen just feels like an NFL receiver. I really wanted to have him on here. I'm happy we talked about him. And do you want to get on to your wide receiver 10?
Yeah, let's get on to my wide receiver 10. It's going to be Mr. Jermaine Burton, wide receiver from Alabama. You want to talk about a speedster. You want to talk about a day one impact slot wide receiver. Jermaine Burton's that guy. He's projected to run a 4.340. Well, to be exact, a 4.3140. And I kind of had a player comp of Jahan Dotson for Jermaine Burton. I thought that was kind of who stood out to me when I watched him on tape, was who he reminded me of. But Jermaine Burton didn't have, you know, the most incredible stats. 798 receiving yards, 8 touchdowns. Um, you know, he played out wide, 238 snaps. I picture him to really roll in to the NFL as a true slot receiver. He's 6 foot, 200 pounds, and just really, really strong at the point of attack with his catch. And just a really physical bodied dude and just an absolute burner. Um, but yeah, Jermaine Burton coming in at number 10 for me.
Yeah, so this is a interesting conversation for me, the Jermaine Burton conversation. I actually have him at my wide receiver 17, and I think it's just because I was like high on him in 2021, and then in 2022 I was high on him to really break out with Bryce Young. I thought him and Bryce Young would be the kind of connection and his time to break out, and it still didn't happen. And then this year I was expecting the breakout to happen, and he was underwhelming to me again. So I don't know. He's underwhelmed me for a few years now, and I can't really get excited about him. But like you said, he's going to light up the combine. He will be a impact as a returner, at the very least, a gadget player. I guess I'm just a little bit lower on him because of his really production, and I'm just kind of expecting more with after he transferred over there.
Right, yeah, he really didn't take that big of a leap from 2021 to 2022 to 2023. I mean, every year he slowly progressed and did get better. His grades in almost every category did improve from year to year basis. But yeah, I mean, he did leave a lot to be desired. And I don't know if this year is because there's Jalen Monroe, who's that quarterback. But yeah, I mean, Isaiah Bond was the clear wide receiver one at Alabama. Jermaine Burton did not touch him. Isaiah Bond might be wide receiver one next year. We will see in the draft class. But yeah, I definitely understand. But yeah, I mean, this guy, like you said, a gadget player. I think he's gonna come into the NFL as a slot receiver. But he's really built guy for the projected speed. I mean, 4.31 seems a little insane to me, but that is what he is projected to run. But a really fun player. Really excited to see which team he ends up on, because in the right situation, I think this guy could thrive.
And did you have a comp for him? I didn't catch it.
Yeah, my comp is actually Jahan Dotson.
Oh yeah.
Is who he reminded me of watching the tape.
Yeah, no, I actually like that a lot. Similar slot receivers, they can get open in similar ways. I do like that.
Yes, sir.
All right, with that, do you want to move on to my wide receiver 9? It's going to be Keon Coleman from Florida State, the big jump ball, go get it receiver, the guy that really succeeds around the rim. That's where he makes his money, is around the rim. That power forward type guy. You just throw it up to him, and he's kind of tanking on consensus rankings right now because he's not really the best separator, not the best, he doesn't really have tempo in his routes. He's not the most fluid guy. He's not the speediest. So his separating, especially in the NFL against these bigger corners, like I mean, Patrick Surtain, Sauce Gardner aren't going to be phased by his size, but his separating is definitely the thing that holds him back and why he's my wide receiver nine. But I mean, we'll talk about the positives because like I said, you throw it up to him and he's one of the best go get it balls guys in this class. You give him to like Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, he's going to be a freak for sure. So I do like him. This feels low, but it's more of a product of like how high I am on the guys ahead of him. Really, like my top eight, I'm just absolutely in love with. So I'm not trying to be low on Keon Coleman. I think I have like a mid to high second round grade on him. And I think that's fair. I think that's where he ultimately ends up. So I do like Keon Coleman. Wanted him to break out more this year as well. That is another thing is I did kind of expect him to take that really big step up with this great Florida State team with how good they were playing, especially, Jordan Travis was healthy most of the year and he didn't really take that step either to Johnny Wilson. So yeah, just a little bit underwhelming. I was more excited about the receivers ahead of him, but what are your thoughts on Keon?
Yeah, Keon Coleman is a monster, man. 6'4", 215 pounds. He's projected to run a 4.45. I don't know how much I buy in on that. I feel like his tape actually looked like he was a lot slower than a 4.45. I mean, 4.45 is really quick. But that is what he is projected to run. My player comp for Keon Coleman was actually Cedric Tillman. I thought that was kind of the most similar guy who he reminded me just recently coming in, to the NFL. Cedric Tillman was last year, right?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy that it's crazy that we're already talking about the 2024 NFL draft. But yeah, my player comp was Cedric Tillman, but a true 50-50 guy. You throw up the ball. I mean, and when I say 50-50, he's more of an 80-20 guy. You throw up the ball to him, he's going to go pluck it out of the air. He was actually a little higher on my list. I'll just say it because we don't need to double down and talk about him, but he was my wide receiver 8. And yeah, he's just a monster of a human and a contested catch type of wide receiver who's a true outside receiver who, you're throwing it up to him for those 80-20 balls. And given the right circumstance, I think I would love to see him on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'd love to see him be Mike Evans' successor. I'd love to see those two run it back for another. I would love to see the Buccaneers resign Mike Evans and draft Keon Coleman to just ultimately be their guy for the next decade. That would be just awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely do like Coleman. I don't want to be low on him because he's fun. He's got potential. Like I could totally see a world where he kind of dominates, but at the same time, I could see a world where he doesn't translate as well to the NFL. And his last season, not really improving, definitely did turn me off a little bit. But with that, do you want to get into your wide receiver nine?
Yeah, let's get into my wide receiver 9. It is going to be Mr. Roman Wilson from the Michigan Wolverines. Um, just a really fun player. When you turn on his tape, he's just electric. He is projected to run a 4.37, and honestly, he looks quicker than that on tape to me. There's some guys that they're projected 40s. I'm like, yeah, I see it. And there's some guys, no, I don't see it. And there's some guys like Roman Wilson. I'm like, this guy might run a 4.32, 4.4, 4.29. I mean, he is just a burner. And my comp for Roman Wilson was a Jalen Hyatt that actually can develop into running a full route tree instead of just a go ball. Um, so that was kind of the slenderness, the frame, the size all reminded me of, and the speed reminded me of Jalen Hyatt. But I think Roman Wilson's upside is a lot higher than Jalen Hyatt's. I feel like he's a guy that can run those short, intermediate, underneath, end around. He's more versatile than just go run a 9, go run a go route. But Roman Wilson, super, super fun. Obviously, I mean, he was ultra productive, 789 receiving yards with 12 touchdowns, 6 foot 192. He is 22, he's 22 going on 23, so he is a little bit of an older receiver. Had an amazing, I mean, his drop rate was only 2%. I mean, he had elite PFF grades in almost every single category except contested catch, where it still was not bad for a guy like him at 37.5. But yeah, Roman Wilson is a fun receiver. What are your thoughts on him?
I mean, that it's a good transition into my wide receiver eight because I'm very high on him as well. I actually comp him to like a Chris Olave, the way that he can separate downfield. The farther he gets downfield, the more open he gets always. It's almost impossible stay stuck on him in coverage. He just separates with pure speed and he accelerates like crazy. You saw the route against Quinion Mitchell that went viral with his one-handed catch at the Senior Bowl. He's just kind of a beast, man. He has like aura. He's got the dog, whatever you want to call it. I really just see it with him whenever I watch him. Whenever Michigan called his number, he delivered. Like you said, he had pretty good production, but he could have had a lot better production if they just, called his number more. It was more of a kind of impact of Michigan just not really needing to use him, not really needing to utilize him and JJ McCarthy. They could just run the ball and win every single game and win a national championship. But I just think Roman Wilson in a different offense could have been like, so productive that he would be like a first round pick lock. I really do think he's like just being a little bit underrated as a receiver prospect right now. And I'm really excited about him. I definitely thought Michigan should have utilized him more, and I'm excited for him to be utilized better in the NFL because I think he could be one of these players that he's better in the NFL than he was in college. And I just see it with him every time he's called upon, he delivers, and he's a really reliable beast. He even like Keenan Allen, he kind of reminds me of like a Keenan Allen. I just think he could be a star the way he gets open. I really love him.
Yeah, no, I mean he's just a phenomenal player, and he really impressed. He was one of the more impressive players down at Mobile. No one could guard him. He was the only one that really got the better of excuse me, cornerback from
Quinion,
Quinion Mitchell. Yes, but he was really the only one who was able to get the better of Quinion Mitchell down at the Senior Bowl in Mobile, and ultra fun wide receiver. If this guy probably would have played at Ohio State, we'd be talking about him top 20 pick.
exactly. Anything else you want to say in Roman before we move on?
Now let's move on.
Really excited about Roman. I mean, not too much to say. Just I'm excited for him in the NFL because I think he can literally outproduce his college production. And with that, let's get on to your wide receiver rate.
Yeah, my wide receiver eight, sneak peek, we already talked about him. Keon Coleman, just the absolute monster of this draft. This guy, I'm just gonna call him, the Mike Evans. Just throw it up, he'll pluck it out of the air. Not too much more to talk on. Keon Coleman, the dude is a monster, given the right situation. I really do feel like he needs the right situation to succeed. And it would have been, there's a lot left to be desired with Keon Coleman, too. I mean, Florida State's offensive line was atrocious. So it would have been fun if they would have had a little bit more time to open up and let these routes develop and really see what Keon Coleman would have done. But I mean, we're looking at Keon Coleman, borderline first round, early second round type of player.
Yeah, and I already talked about him, so I don't need to talk about him for too much. But with that, let's get on to my wide receiver seven, and it is Lad McConkey. I am definitely very high on him. I mean, what's the point of the receiver position? Is it not to get open? What is the point of the receiver position? Because every time I watch this guy, he is just playing fools. Corners can't guard him. Every time I'm watching a good corner, he's getting cooked by Lad McConkey. It's crazy. There's not too many more players in this draft that I'm like more confident in working out, especially like day one. I have zero doubt that he'll be a really good day one impact, like a Puka Nakua instant type impact. He affects the game in the same way Puka does, and just finding the open space, getting open, making it easy on his quarterback. I think Lad is just going to translate well to the NFL. He's such a smart and crafty route runner. The way he sets up his breaks, and he just has a great awareness of space and just feel for getting open. And I really don't see a world where he fails in the NFL. So I have him as my wide receiver seven right now. It seems high. I feel like it's low. I really want to move him up to wide receiver six, and I think I will. I'm already kind of thinking about it. And I mean, the funny thing about Lad is like you look at him, you pigeonhole him to being a white slot receiver, whatever, slow. He's gonna test well at the combine. I really do think he's gonna test well. He's a pretty good athlete. I think he's a really good athlete, actually. So I'm really excited about Lad. I think he's going to translate very well. I do have a comp to Lad and Deontay Johnson, who I think it's just perfect because when you watch them run their routes, get in and out of their breaks, it's almost exactly identical. And I think he's that type of player. Emmanuel Sanders is another good comp, just being able to trust him over the middle and just knowing that he'll come down with any ball, even if he's getting hit. So I just love Lad. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, Lad, didn't crack my top 10. Not because of skill, route running, anything like that. There's just, he only played in 9 games this year, 488, 483 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. But yeah, Lad McConkey, is one of the more refined route runners in this entire draft class. I mean, the two things you need to be good at as an NFL wide receiver are getting open and catching the ball. And Lad McConkey has shown that he can do both. And yeah, he might definitely get overlooked because he's just a smaller white receiver. And I don't know if he'll, he's projected a 4.6 40. I don't know if he's just gonna, totally stand out. I feel like he's kind of the guy that kind of gets blended in and gets overlooked. But yeah, I mean, he is a really good wide receiver. The quarterback at Georgia, not a very good quarterback. So the quarterback play definitely regressed. So that's why we weren't able to really see too much of Lad McConkey. But I mean, he has had 3 straight years of elite PFF grades, and it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see where he goes. Like I said, he's a guy, that seems quicker than fast to me. His straight line speed is not incredibly fast, but his maneuvers, his cuts, his cone drill is probably going to be unreal. And so I'm super excited to see that, and then really get a better feel. Come here in the next, was it the next week or something at the combine? I think the combine's in a week.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, the
It's
combine's
coming up
coming up.
here
So
soon.
yeah, the combine's coming up here in the next, like, I think week. I think might be like not this Saturday, but next Saturday. It's coming up here quick.
Hell yeah, let's go. I mean, I think Lad will, yeah, definitely like he's so crafty in and out of his breaks in the intermediate game, close to the line of scrimmage. He's gonna completely dominate. So absolutely love Lad, the way he gets open. I just have no doubt that he will succeed and translate to the NFL. But with that, we want to get on to your wide receiver 7.
Yes, sir. My wide receiver 7 is going to be wide receiver from the University of Texas, Xavier Worthy. Another guy on this list who, really wasn't the wide receiver 1 in his offense, so that might be why he gets overlooked. Kind of a more slender frame wide receiver. Xavier Worthy is 6'1", 172 pounds. He's only 20 years old. He's a true junior coming out. But yeah, I mean, this guy, you want a burner down the field. You want a guy who, can take end arounds, who's just kind of that shifty, nifty, quick wide receiver. And I don't know if I really project him being a true wide receiver 1 at the next level, but a really good wide receiver 2. And yeah, he's a burner, man. He's projected around a 4.29 40, which is just crazy. Yeah, he's a guy that's fast. And I came up with two. I kind of had two guys who he kind of reminded me of, and maybe it's more because the frame. Jordan Addison. He definitely reminded me a little bit of. He had a little bit of Jordan Addison. Also Marvin Mims coming out of college too. Those were kind of my two comps for him. But I mean, he was very productive. Even being the wide receiver 1A, 1B. With Adonai Mitchell, he still had 1,000 receiving yards for 5 touchdowns. And he played, I also like his versatility. He played 196 snaps in the slot and 294 snaps out wide. The only thing I mean, given his size, he's not a great contested catch wide receiver. His contested catch grade is a 23.8, which is on the lower side. But yeah, I mean, a guy who I think could really be a true wide receiver too, given the right circumstance, given the right situations, but a true burner. I mean, this guy is fast. And he stood out to me because he actually got the better of excuse me. Maybe because we're not on this episode, corners episode. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, from Alabama, corner, the number 1 corner.
Carry on, Arnold.
Yeah, Terrion Arnold. He got the better of Terrion Arnold, and that's really where his tape stood out to me. I mean, there's a couple times where he burned right past Terrion Arnold, who's clearly the corner 1 in this draft class.
Yeah, so no doubt in my mind, he will be the fastest player in the combine. I'm sure of it. He's gonna, ruin the combine. I personally am a little bit lower on him as well, kind of similar to Jermaine Burton. I have him one spot higher than Burton on my rankings at 16. He came out as a freshman and he got everyone excited. He's insanely, fun and gadgety and athletic. I thought he was a little bit underwhelming ever since and kind of tailed off and to the wrong direction the end of his career. I would say he honestly kind of got worse every single year, and his PFF grades even got worse every single year. And I don't know. I think from the time he was 18 on like his freshman year on, he just got worse. I would say Quinn Ewers didn't help him at all. Quinn Ewers has a terrible deep ball. So
Oh my god, dude! Watching Texas tape and watching Keon Ewers, it was painful. watching him on a play-to-play basis was almost just painful.
Yeah, so he was underwhelming to me, but at the same time, it wasn't the best situation for him at all. If he was, in a different offense, that had a better deep ball throw, I do think he would be more successful. I do think he's one of these players that can be better in the NFL. My comp for him is like a Travis Benjamin. I know you're familiar with him. I do see him being like that type of receiver or just player in the NFL, more of a kick returner, wide receiver four type. But I mean, he is fun, and I do see the potential with him for sure.
Yeah, no, that is a really good comp. I'd say probably earlier days, Travis Mitchell, or sorry, Travis Benjamin. But yeah, he is a fun receiver. And again, yeah, I believe, yeah, he'll be better in the NFL than he was in college.
Yeah, but he's electric. He's gonna light up the combine, and yeah, he's a fun guy. Like if you were playing Madden, you definitely want to play with
His
him.
his 40 speed is going to get him drafted high. Let's just
Yeah,
say that.
100%. I would agree with that. And with that, let's get on to another Texas receiver, my wide receiver six, AD Mitchell from Texas, the Georgia transfer. He also balled out of Georgia. He's just a great prospect. But yeah, he's truly that guy in the red zone. That's kind of the appeal with AD Mitchell, like Keon Coleman to an even better extent. You throw it up to him, and he has a real knack for just coming down with it. More often than not, he will come down with it. And the advanced numbers with AD are rough. They don't favor him at all. I mean, his separation percentage is really rough if you really get into like the real analytical numbers. It is a little bit scary. You kind of have to just trust your eyes with AD. I think the perfect comp for him is George Pickens. It's kind of like he really likes to take plays off. He's not really there all the time. He's not really a willing blocker. He coasts a lot. That's a good way to put it. But when he's zoned in, he does have some great games. He has some plays where he just mosses people. He has the potential to really do anything. He looks like Rashi Rice after the catch. So he's a really hard evaluation for me. He's like kind of just in the medium. I mean, he's got a lot of highs, a lot of lows. It's really hard to really for me to rank AD Mitchell. Like I was saying, I kind of want to move him below Lad McConkey, but at the same time, he's got so much upside. It's hard. It's a hard medium. It's a hard discussion with AD. He's a really fun player. How do you feel about him?
That George Pickens, like in the terms of like headspace, is just hilarious. Like, kind of how, almost like the body language and the attitude of George Pickens is like spot on. That almost I made me laugh. I mean, you can kind of watch his body language and attitude through the game, and the effort. Yeah, like you said, the effort just it does scare me. It does scare me, but I mean, but when he wants to give effort and he knows the ball's coming his way, man. I mean, you wanna watch fun tape of AD Mitchell, you go turn on Washington, man, and you can see he's crying over there on the sideline, throw me the damn ball. They just throw it up into the end zone, and man, he just picks it out of the sky. I mean, just a true aggressor at the point of attack, which is just phenomenal. But yeah, I mean, he's a big body receiver. He's 6'4", 196. And then I'll get into he's projected to run a 4.5 40. Seems about right to me. He's a really good contested catch wide receiver, and I love that comp. Yeah, with George Pickens at the point. Like at the point of attack, it's very similar to George Pickens. The
And
route running and the size is very similar to Rashi Rice. And that's kind of what I picture him to be, is kind of that in between. But yeah, I mean, he does leave a lot to be desired in his tape, and just the attitude and the effort and the unwillingness to run every single route super hard, sell his routes, to block. But when he does block and he gets his hands on people, he's a good blocker, but he just doesn't want to do it. And so that's the thing, is which it can be coached, it can be fixed up at the next level. And if this guy gets his head right, and he gets the right system, the right coach, he's gonna be good, man. AD Mitchell could be, a top three wide receiver from this draft class easily. Does AD Mitchell want to do it? Does he want to be that guy? And yeah, I mean, I really love the prospect, and given a good system where he's going to get targeted a lot and he knows the ball's coming his way, he's going to be a monster, man. I mean, he's the physical tools, the physical traits are all there, and that does not worry me at all.
yeah, and kind of like going with the George Pickens comp. George has like one game a year will go for 300 yards, and I feel like AD is capable of that same thing. He'll have one game a year where he's completely zoned in and locked in, and he'll just go absolutely crazy. So I do think he's definitely got that high variance, and he's going to he's a high upside player. He's going to be have some games where he's crazy and mossing NFL corners.
And he cut Kool-Aid McKinstry quite a few times. I mean, he plucked the ball right away from Kool-Aid McKinstry, who's a top corner in this draft class. And against Washington, Washington was a hell of a team. Made the championship, college football championship, and AD Mitchell had a hell of a game from them. And I recommend anyone to go watch the AD Mitchell versus Washington tape. It's a fun watch.
Yeah, versus Washington versus Alabama. Even in his Georgia days, he has some really good tape. So yeah, AD Mitchell is definitely a fun prospect. My kind of prospect report on him is as a 6'4" receiver, he's insanely fluid, natural separator, insane at the catch point. He's a touchdown machine and acrobatic playmaker. And I think he's a great like number 2 option. I think he's a perfect number 2 option in like a high powered scoring offense. He can be absolutely insane if he goes to one of these situations like the Chiefs or the Bills where he can be, a number 2 high end and just really dominate in that situation. And I will say my one knock on him, other than the other stuff, is he's a body catcher. I was watching a Steve Smith podcast and he was kind of just ranting about AD Mitchell's body catching for like 30 minutes, and Steve's a nerd about that stuff. So I do think he needs to work on the little things, but yeah, he's a fun prospect.
I'll be honest, if Steve's saying some stuff, you gotta listen to Steve Smith, man. That guy's not really usually wrong. I'll have to go watch that. It might change my whole entire mind on AD Mitchell, but Steve Smith, notorious for calling out good receivers, and he kind of just says it how it is. There's no sugarcoating it. He's not afraid to call people out.
He definitely says it how it is. This podcast is pretty funny. There's some receiver takes that he has that are a little odd, but most of it is pretty good stuff for sure.
Yes, sir. All right, is it my turn for number 6?
Yeah, let's get on to your wide receiver 6.
All right, my wide receiver 6 is gonna be Oregon wide receiver Troy Franklin, and you want to turn on some electric tape, man. You want to see a guy take the absolute top off the defense. It's Troy Mitchell. This guy is projected to run a 4.35 40. And this is another guy that looks faster than that on tape. I wouldn't be surprised if it's really low 4.43s, like 4.31. I wouldn't even be surprised if he cracks in the 4.2s at some point, because he is an absolute burner. Troy Franklin is 6'3", 187. He's got a good height, he's got a good physical stature to him. Elite production this year, 1,383 receiving yards to go along with 14 touchdowns and 81 receptions. And he really graded out an elite score on every single level, man. When it comes to receiving grade, yards per route run, grade versus man coverage, contested catch rate. He is just a stud. He did have 9 drops, but it just doesn't worry me with him. It didn't worry me with him. And he took over that Oregon offense with Bo Nix, and was just one of the most electric players in college football, man. And a guy that can get into the end zone, a guy that can take the top off the defense, and honestly run the intermediate routes really well as well too.
Yeah, so we'll get on to my wide receiver 5 here, because Troy Franklin is the most explosive deep threat receiver in this class to me. He had the second most explosive plays of any receiver in the Pac-12 over the last 2 years, other than a guy named Odunze, who's sort of good. We'll talk about him here soon. But yeah, I really do truly think that Troy is just the best deep threat and best deep weapon in this class. The numbers back it up. And Marvin Harrison, Malik Nabers, Odunze are in this class. So I'm really excited for Troy. I think if he ends up in a situation like the Chiefs or the Bills again, like these other guys, he's gonna dominate. He's 6'3", he's really fluid, a good route runner. I think that's another thing, is he's really nuanced as a route runner, and no one really talks about that. No one really gives him that credit. He's good in the intermediate game as well. So I really do like Troy Franklin. I like his prospects. I think he's going to succeed in the NFL. I could see him being a wide receiver 1. I don't know if I could see it with these other guys we've talked about, but he's really the first guy I could see being a wide receiver 1 in the perfect situation, if not a really high tier wide receiver 2, insane deep threat. Brett Coleman, compared to Marquez Valdes-Scantling, he's concerned about the drops. I'm really not concerned about the drops. You turn on the tape of this guy, and he just comes down with everything downfield. He comes down with he's a top tier deep threat. He's gonna have some drops because he's gonna have some of the harder like catches thrown to him. He's gonna have some of the harder thrown balls thrown to him in these deep ball situations. So he's going to have drops, but he is very reliable. I really just I'm confident that Troy Franklin will have a good impact in the NFL. Just a little bit too overhated in the drop conversation, in my opinion. And yeah, I don't know. I just think I think the comp for him is like a Jordan Addison, like a better deep threat Jordan Addison, like a Jordan Addison intermediate game. And then maybe Marquez Valdes-Scantling as a deep threat, but with hands. And then, yeah, I don't know. You just pair him up with the Patrick Mahomes, and I think it's over. I think the league's over.
Yeah, no. I had a player comp of him of Jamison Williams at Alabama. Just kind of that, incredible polarizing prospect. And so yeah, that was my comp for him. And yeah, I mean, gosh, he's gonna crack the first round. Somebody's gonna fall in love with Troy Franklin. It's too hard not to. And he'll crack the first round, and it could be a San Francisco. It probably will be a Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, and that'll just be a duo that'll be just lethal.
Yeah, and I mean, just another guy that was just incredibly productive, I mean, he has high upside. Like he got a lot better every single year. I wanted him to get better as a route runner this offseason, and he got a lot better. He was a really good route runner this year. I was really impressed. And Tez Johnson as the receiver opposite of him, he's going to be like a top 10 pick next year. So it's impressive in his own right that he was able to produce as much as he did with Tez on the opposite of him. So really like Troy. I'm definitely going to be higher on him than most. He's going to be one of my guys for sure of this draft. I really love him, but let's go on to your wide receiver five.
Yeah, my wide receiver five, AD Mitchell, Adonai Mitchell, who we already, spoke a lot about. And, Adonai Mitchell is going to be ultimately one of my guys this year. I really like the player. I really like the size, the elite athleticism. I like the point of attack on the football. And, there's not too much more to say than what we've already said, but just a guy who I think is really going to excel at the next level. And you gave a comp earlier of can't remember who it was to. Was it Jalen Polk of T. Higgins? But I'm gonna give that. I'm gonna re-steal that comp and give it to Adonai Mitchell, who I think will be an elite wide receiver too, kind of like a T. Higgins, who in the right system, you have a Jamar Chase type player, and you add Adonai Mitchell to it. He's just gonna thrive. He can go to a wide receiver core with like say the Chargers. Um, Draft him come the second round. Keenan Allen, wide receiver one, Adonai Mitchell, wide receiver two guys who I think could crack 1,000 wide receiving yards with, like a guy like Justin Herbert. That'd be like my dream scenario. I'm saying I'm a big AD Mitchell guy. I'd love to see him on the Chargers come second round, and I think he could be that kind of, T. Higgins to Jamar Chase for like a Keenan Allen in a Justin Herbert led offense.
Yeah, in the right situation, if he fully taps into that potential, he has all the upside in the world. So really exciting. I already talked about him as my wide receiver six, but let's get on to my wide receiver four, Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU. Incredibly productive this year. 68 catches, 1,177 yards, and 17 touchdowns with Jaden Daniels honestly leaving a lot on the bone. Watching Brian's film recently, Jane Daniels missed him a lot. He wasn't really looking his way a lot. He could have had a lot more deep touchdowns. But incredible player. He was a legitimate basketball recruit at LSU. He was like a top basketball recruit who actually played at LSU. And he has the bunnies, he has the hops. He's gonna be one of these guys that has these highlight plays where he goes up and just jumps over someone and makes crazy catches. He has that type of ability to really he has strong hands at the catch point. So I do think he's gonna be incredible as a contested catcher in the NFL. I really just have a good feeling about Brian Thomas. When you watch him, you can just see it. You can see him working in the NFL. You can see him, being an insane deep threat. If you use him like Gabe Davis was supposed to be used for the Bills, he's the best receiver in the NFL. So I mean, I really excited for him. I think the biggest thing to work on with him will be like the route running nuance and just creating more separation, working more on the intermediate game. And yeah, just kind of yeah, route running nuance would be perfect for me. He's a big guy. He's very fluid though, so I think he could actually be better at that.
Yeah, I love that, and that's a great transition into my number four, who is Brian Thomas Jr. as well. Brian Thomas Jr. projected to run a 4.47, 40. My player comp for him, just there's a lot of similarities to those breakout games and stuff. But yeah, George Pickens, like you said, with AD Mitchell, a guy who can who can really have those breakout type of games of 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's just that kind of guy. I mean, he scored 17 touchdowns at LSU this year. That is elite. Scoring touchdowns is the most important thing in football, and Brian Thomas did it at a level that was better than anyone else. Any wide receiver in this class, he was the best at scoring touchdowns. That is this year. I mean, obviously, yeah, I felt like Jaden Daniels, who was the Heisman winner, did leave a lot on the bone. He obviously had to compete with, a guy who we're going to talk about here in a minute, Malik Nabers, and still just put up insane production. I mean, it was just wild. But again, the right situation, and another player comp, George Pickens, Mike Evans type guy, an absolute touchdown machine, a go off, a big bodied receiver who's going to body you out, a real 80-20 type of guy. But I mean, Brian Thomas Jr., given the right situation, man, could be an elite wide receiver. And, there's some minor things that he needs to clean up in his tape and his film. But I mean, if he gets coached up a little bit at the next level, I mean, this guy could be scary, dude.
No, I really like what you said. I think as a deep threat, he in the right situation, in the perfect situation, and like reaching his full potential, I really do think he can be Mike Evans, like a top deep threat in the NFL. He had the second most deep receiving yards in college football with 670. In the perfect situation with the, Josh Allen throwing to him or something like that, he really can be a Mike Evans impact. And I think we both kind of see him as that type of player. Personally, I think the Broncos could take him like at pick 12, just for an example of like how
That's
highly
how
I think
high.
of him. And I
Mhm.
wouldn't really think too much of it. I would think it's a good pick. I would, if I was a team that, was thinking of trading for Ayuk, I would 1,000% rather have Brian Thomas, the younger player. I wouldn't have to pay Ayuk. You get the rookie contract. I think Brian Thomas is going to be very valuable. I think he's going to be a huge day one impact for someone. And I really am excited for him. If he goes to Jaguars, where you see a lot of mock drafts, I think Trevor will just eat with him. I think that's a perfect connection.
Oh yeah, I mean Trevor could absolutely feed him. That would be fun. But I mean, yeah, I mean Brian Thomas Jr. in 2021 and 2022, really a nobody. This was really his breakout year. With an elite PFF grade, 1,000 receiving yards, the 17 touchdowns, just contested catch rate of 53.8, which is just ridiculous. True 50-50 guy. But yeah, I mean, he's gonna be fun, man. He's gonna be fun and he's gonna be scary to game plan against on Sundays.
All right, are we getting into the discussion? Are we getting into the Rome versus Neighbors discussion? Are we doing it?
It's time. It's time to move into the big boy league, man. This is where young boys become men as we're getting into right here.
All right, it's time. This is what everyone clicked on the video for, and we'll get on to my wide receiver three. It will be Malik Nabers. It's kind of hard to talk about him negatively because when we're talking about three receivers who are going to be drafted in the top 10, all three of these top receivers could easily be the best receiver of really any normal draft class. Like I said at the top, this might be the best receiver draft class we've ever seen when it's all said and done. So it's hard. You got to get nitpicky. I'm not really high on Neighbors, if I'm being honest. I really do love Neighbors, and every time I watch him, he excites me. His run after catch, I'll try to talk more positive about him too, because I mean, like his run after the catch, you throw it to him in the intermediate game as like a screens. He's gonna take it. My comp for him is an Odell Beckham Jr. because, or like a prime Odell Beckham Jr. just because he was so good after the catch. He's so like shifty. His just movement is just different, and you can see it, and he just has good wiggle. Like his rack is just special. Like DJ Moore is another good comp. So yeah, I'll get onto my negatives on why I have him at three. Ultimately, you have to get nitpicky when you're talking about these top guys. And when I watch Neighbors, his strength at the catch point and contested catching situations, it just scares me. I can't stop thinking about it. Like there's certain plays that are still vividly in my head of Neighbors where it's almost like 100% a drop if it's a real contested catch at the catch point. And when you're talking about three generational receivers, I don't think there's anything that scares me like that with the other two, if I'm being honest. And I mean, he's a 6 foot, Rome's 6'3". Like we're talking about a man amongst men, and like size wise, and Neighbors visibly is less comfortable on the outside than Odunze. I truly believe just you can visibly see it with your eyes when you watch Neighbors line up on the outside. There are situations in press where he isn't as comfortable. especially as Odunze who lives on the outside. He's been there his whole life. He's just bigger than everyone, so he's not, scared about it. I don't know. I think that's the knocks on Neighbors. That's why I have to move him behind Odunze. It's nothing against him though, because he's one of the better, rack players I've ever seen. He's got that wiggle. He's got that Jamar Chase in him, really. He almost does have that. I would say after he catches the ball, he turns into Jamar Chase. He's that type of player. So don't want to have a negative tone with him really because he's just electric. And I know you love Malik as well, but
Oh,
you
dude. Yeah, I absolutely love Malik Nabers. And I didn't even really have a wide receiver three. It was a wide receiver 2A and a wide receiver 2B. And just by the hair
know.
of my chinny chin chin, did I have Rome above Malik Nabers. But I mean, you want to look at a spitting image of Jamar Chase. Let me just tell you their stature. Jamar Chase is 6 foot, 201 pounds. Malik Nabers is 6 foot, 200 pounds. Um, they're going to run about the exact same 40. Malik Nabers is projected to run a 4.440, and my hint player comp for him is Jamar Chase. I mean, he is just fun, man. If you're looking for a guy that's just fun, he's a fun receiver, and when the ball touches his hands like Jamar Chase, you're thinking house call, man. If he has a little bit of room to work with, you're thinking house call for this guy. And this is he put up 1,568 yards on 89 receptions with 14 touchdowns. It's just I can't get Jamar Chase out of my head. I mean, elite receiving grade of 93.1, elite yards per route run at 3.64 yards per route run. His grade versus man coverage 90.8. I mean, just a guy who can run every single route in the route tree. He can beat you deep, he can beat you underneath, he can beat you in the intermediate game. And it's just, so exciting. And a guy, I mean, and I really love to see this type of production from a receiver. So 2021, a 70.1 PFF grade, 430 yards, 4 touchdowns. 2022, 77.6 grade, 1,000 yards, 3 touchdowns. Here comes 2023, 92.9 grade with 1,568 receiving yards and 14 touchdowns. I already said that earlier, but Malik Nabers makes me excited, man. Just he's gonna be when he's gonna be considered. And I'm sorry to keep blabbering on about him, but he's a fun prospect. But he's gonna be one of these Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, DJ Moore type player on Sundays, and he's gonna be come fantasy football. He's gonna be a guy that's gonna be looked at as a number 1, 2 round pick here in the next couple of years.
Yeah, he's just special. That's a good way to put him. His acceleration, his shiftiness, it's really different. You can see it the way he moves. It is different, and it's really hard to tackle him. He's really hard to bring down. I think another good comp for him is he's a really good route runner. He's one of the better route runners in this class,
Chris
100.
Olave.
I was thinking like a Brandon Ayuk. I truly think Brandon Ayuk's like the best route runner in the NFL at this point. And so I was thinking like Brandon Ayuk, like in and out of his breaks, especially like the way he, cuts and in intermediate routes. And then I think he turns into Jamar Chase after the catch. So really exciting prospect. You can talk about Malik all day. Anything else you want to say about him?
No, just this is these top three, man. They're different. They'd be wide receiver one in the past five draft class, no doubt about it. All three of them would be at the top, and they all come out in the same year. So we're gonna have three top 10 wide receivers, and it's gonna be. I mean, this year, like we were talking about at the start of the episode, and these guys are different, man. I mean, these guys are built different. These three.
And speaking of build different, let's just get into our wide receiver two, and let's just say why we have this guy as our wide receiver two. It's because he's built different. He has a 74% contested catch rate, by far the best in the country, obviously, because 74% contested catch rate doesn't even seem real. Statistically, if you just throw an F it, Odunze's up there somewhere ball, he's gonna come down with it 3 out of 4 times. Like that's just a crazy
That's
thing to think about. Like we're comparing to this guy to Marvin Harrison. I really think he's right there with Marvin Harrison. You throw a fade to him, you throw a back shoulder fade to him in the red zone, he's gonna come down with it. At the catch point, he's just nasty. He plucks the ball out of the air. And I think Daniel Jeremiah tweeted this the other day. The definition of a number one receiver is when the game is on the line, it's the fourth down, and the whole the whole stadium knows where the ball's going. It's obvious. And Rome Odunze is that guy. He's that alpha outside receiver where you know you can just build an offense around him. He can be the focal point. He can be that 10 target a game guy. So can Neighbors 100%. I 100% believe that. But Odunze to the extent where I just think he has that dog in him on the outside. He has the frame. He's built. He just is built to last and succeed on the outside. I thought Rome should have legitimately been in the Heisman conversation. I thought he kind of got snubbed not being in the finals, in the finalists at least. What he did to elevate that team, what he did to elevate Penix in situations where Penix just threw it up to him, and he 74% contested catch rate. That's a pretty easy job for quarterbacks. So he's right there behind Marvin Harrison Jr. with me for the best receivers I've ever scouted. 100%. I absolutely love him. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I mean, he's getting comps of Larry Fitzgerald, man. I mean, and it's for a reason. I mean, Rome Odunze, 6'3", 215 pounds, a true junior coming into the draft. This guy is projected to run a 4.37 40-yard dash. And yeah, my two player comps were Larry Fitzgerald and Keenan Allen. I mean, his tempo and his getting into his routes, he doesn't look like he's going to run a 4.37 because his tempo and his route timing and his just elite. I mean, his hands, dude. I think one of the most underrated things about Rome Odunze is when you're watching him, just the slow hands to confuse the corners. He doesn't put his hands up fast. I mean, it is the ball's coming and it's boom. He plucks it out of the air. I mean, corners get so confused because it feels like the ball's coming. Where's the ball? His hands have not moved. Boom, he plucks it out of the air. So the late hands on Rome Odunze are just elite. He kind of does everything at elite level. The only thing I could possibly be nitpicky, if we're going to be nitpicky, is he's not the best yak guy. I don't think he's a terrible yak guy, but he just does not have the elite yak yards after catch ability. But everything else is there. I mean, the refined route running is there. The deep threat is there. The contested catch is there. I mean, every level of the defense, he can beat you. And that quote you said at the beginning is, yeah, when the game's on the line, it's fourth down. Everyone knows where the ball is going. Can they stop you? No. That's the kind of guy Rome Odunze is, and he's going to be special, man. I mean, this is a different type of wide receiver. It's hard to be nitpicky, but he is a hair above Malik Nabers. The size is there. He's probably going to run faster than Malik Nabers. But yeah, I mean, this guy's just, he's going to be something special. He's going to be one of the best wide receivers in the league here soon. And look out for Rome Odunze's name. And this guy's polarizing, man. He's electric.
And just like kind of reading off his production profile, 13 touchdowns, 92 receptions, 1,639 yards in an offense where he was sharing with two receivers that will be drafted like in the top 100 in McMillan and Polk. So that's crazy. And we're talking about him like he's an intermediate, just absolute star. But he had the most deep yards and at 783 in all of college football, and he had the most deep catches in all of college football at 23. So he can literally do it all. He's just a dominant receiver. I get really excited talking about him because I'm almost positive he will translate and just be a star receiver in the NFL. If you are talking dynasty fantasy football, trade whatever you need to get your second overall pick or whatever it is that's needed to get Rome, because I'm pretty positive he'll translate and no matter the situation, he's gonna be dominant. Just really excited about him.
Yeah, I mean, and like you said, I mean, and the grades, it's just he had the college process of what everyone loves to see. Every single year, he improved his grade at an elite status. I mean, it went from 65.2 to 79.1 to 89.8. And the production increased every single year. The receiving grade was elite. The man coverage grade was elite. The drop rate was elite. The contested catch grade was elite. The yards per route run is elite. I mean, he's elite in every single category this year. And yeah, like you said, we're a fantasy podcast too. We do it all. Come, dynasty draft, come draft season, this is the guy that you'll want to try and sneak on your team.
And just like one more statistic to kind of warrant why the ultimate reason I put him over Neighbors at least is I just want to take the guy that's more comfortable on the outside. I want to take the alpha wide receiver one on the outside, and he's great versus man coverage, 89.5. I don't know his grade versus press, but I know he fares well versus press. He's just a big guy. I feel like he's the one. shucking the corners off him. So absolutely love Rome. With that, do you want to get into both of our wide receiver one?
Let's get into the generational guy, man. Let's get into the blue chip, the no doubt about it type of guy. Danny, take the floor.
All right. It might be a surprise to everyone, but we're going to be bold here. We're going to put Marvin Harrison Jr. He'll probably end up as my number one prospect in the whole draft when it's all said and done. Absolutely beast. I feel like I have absolutely a beast. I feel like I have to say it, but his father is Hall of Famer Marvin Harrison. So he's got the bloodline. You can see it when you watch him. He's definitely not human. He's definitely robotic. He's 6'4", moves insanely fluid. One of the better route runners of this class as a 6'4" guy, just because he's got the genes. I don't know what it is, but he has everything you could possibly want. I would say he's the smoothest like prospect I've ever seen at coming down with contested catches and adjusting to the ball, especially. I would say he's the best receiver I've ever seen at adjusting to the football. First of all, he does some incredible stuff in the air and he gets his feet in bounds and just makes crazy plays. He can do everything. He can do anything. He's so smooth. He literally was OSU's offense. He was their entire offense. Watching him every single week was honestly immaculate because they would just rely on screen plays to Marvin, and his production would be like 10 catches for 100 yards and at least one touchdown every single week. And without fail, he would score at least a touchdown every week. And he was like a quarterback for that team. And I thought he honestly should have won Heisman because of just how impactful he was. I thought he was the most impactful player in college football. We know Devin Brown is, or Cal McCord was not a good quarterback. And Marvin made him look decent because he's Marvin Harrison and he can just do anything. I think Marvin could go into the NFL and just be completely dominant. I think even with like I don't know, a Russell Wilson throw to him. I think he could be an instant Cortland Sutton in the NFL. I think he's going to be an instant prime AJ Green in the NFL. They have the same measurables. They play pretty similar. He's just going to be a star. He's going to be, I don't know, I want to say Hall of Famer because I truly do believe he's the best receiver prospect to ever come out into the draft. And I'm someone that was insanely, insanely high on Jamar Chase, but I think Marvin's going to be that guy.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you at all. Marvin Harrison Jr. looks like a guy that's been groomed by a Hall of Fame wide receiver his entire life. And that's what's been going on. I mean, this guy has been groomed by a Hall of Famer since he was born. And you know, I think his measurables and what he's going to be is going to be better than his dad. I don't think there's any reason he's not going to be better than his dad. I mean, his hands, his fluidity. Like I'm going to say, I'm going to sound, like a mocking parrot to you, but I mean everything you said was right on the spot. I mean Marvin Harrison Jr. I'll just get into a little bit of different stats. Projected to run a 4.39 40 at 6'4" is kind of ridiculous. My player comps for him, I kind of combined him into like two people, kind of like a Drake London and Justin Jefferson type receiver is like molded into one guy, but more fluid in a way. I mean, just more fluid in his routes and getting off. I mean, beating press coverage, beating man coverage. I mean, getting off the line of scrimmage. I mean, just everything he does. He's been groomed by a he's been groomed by a Hall of Famer since he was born. Um, and yeah, I mean, the production is there. I mean, this dude in back-to-back seasons. I mean, you can kind of chalk his 2021 season. I mean, he was playing behind. I mean, he was a freshman playing behind Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, a
Jackson Smith
handful
and
of
Jigba.
Jackson. I mean, just it was the most insane wide receiver room you've ever heard of, and so he didn't even get a chance to shine until I think it was it. I think all of his production came in one game against Utah, right?
Rose Bowl.
Yeah, the Rose Bowl where he scored 3 touchdowns and 139 yards, and you're like, okay, who's this guy right here? And what does he do? He follows it up with back-to-back seasons of 1,200 receiving yards and 14 touchdowns in both seasons. Yeah, I mean, anything you want, anything you could dream of in a receiver is Marvin Harrison Jr. And like you said, he's probably the best wide receiver prospect to ever come out of college football. And yeah, when it's all said and done, I think I've already had him penciled in as my number one prospect above a guy like Caleb Williams. And I think, this is when we talk about blue chip, when we talk about generational type talent, it's Marvin Harrison Jr. is the kind of guys we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I get geeked up talking about him. He's just such a fun prospect. I'm so excited to watch him in the NFL because I'm 100% positive he also dominates in the NFL. Speaking of fantasy, do everything to get Marvin Harrison Jr. because no matter the situation, he's going to be the focal point of that offense. He's a perfect player. I would like to say he's perfect. So, anything else you want to say about him? Like honestly, every single advanced statistic with him, like 89.6 receiving grade, 3.44 yards per route run. He's just insane. And just really with Marvin, it's just watching the film. You just see him. You see the way he plays, the way he can somehow move with his size. He shucks people off of him. He can outrun really anyone. Kalen King still seeing ghosts from their matchup. He's just that dude.
It's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be fun, man. Come April, it's just gonna be fun to see. I mean, we kind of chalk in Marvin Harrison Jr. to one of two locations as of right now. But who knows, man? Maybe Chicago will surprise us. Maybe he goes number one overall. It wouldn't be out of the realm of possibilities. And this guy could go number one. He could go number two. He could go number three. He could go number four. He could go number five. He will go in the top five picks, obviously. But it would be interesting if somehow some teams traded up and the first four picks were quarterbacks just because teams are desperate for quarterbacks because it is a quarterbacks league. And he fell to five, Dan. How about that? How about Marvin Harrison Jr. to the Los Angeles Chargers at pick number five? Pair him with Justin Herbert. It's the most beautiful situation you've ever seen in the history of NFL.
Well, we'll transition to that into our excellent take because that was the hottest take I've ever heard in my life. He's gonna absolutely gonna be a Cardinal, if not a Patriot. But I like
Hey, one can dream. One can dream. One can get his hopes up. Maybe a draft day miracle will happen, and we'll see four straight quarterbacks. It's never been done before, but it's going to be done this year because Marvin Harrison Jr. wants to be a Charger. Let's just say that.
he's gonna force his way out for Harbaugh. Uh, but no, this was really fun. This was insanely fun. I'm excited to get. We're gonna have one prospect ranking episode per week. Next week will probably be corners. We're still deciding what we want to do, but yeah, really fun. I feel like we could have talked about so many more receivers, but anything else you want to say?
No, just keep your dreams alive, man. We got the combine coming up here in a week. Then it's just a short couple weeks till free agency, March madness, free agency frenzy, starting March 13th. It's just we got a lot of fun things, a lot of fun content coming up, and tune in because I mean we're all things draft, all things everything we're going to be doing. So just stay tuned, like, subscribe, keep commenting, keep supporting us, and we'll keep doing it.
Yep, draft, free agency, even fantasy football content. Eventually, we're here for it all. So stay tuned to the NFL Seekers podcast. Like, comment, subscribe. Peace.